A man once told an old teacher something strange. Not terrifying, not supernatural, just strange. He said, "Every night I sleep in my room, but I never feel rested." He explained that his body slept, but his mind never truly became quiet. Some nights he woke up anxious, other nights restless, and sometimes he woke up already tired. At first, he blamed stress, then work, then life, but after many months, he began noticing something deeper. The uneasiness only happened inside his room, and that is when he visited the old teacher. The teacher listened carefully, then asked one simple question: "What's around you while you sleep?" The man looked confused, because he expected advice about stress, prayer, discipline, or health, not his surroundings. The teacher repeated the question: "What objects stay near your bed every night?" The man thought carefully, then began listing things casually: his phone, his laptop, old receipts, unopened bills, clutter, random clothing, noise from the television. The teacher became silent, then slowly nodded, because according to ancient wisdom, the objects surrounding a person during rest quietly affect the condition of the mind. The teacher explained, wise people protected the place where they slept, not because of superstition, but because they understood something modern people ignore. The mind absorbs atmosphere, and atmosphere is shaped by sound, light, disorder, emotion, and constant stimulation. The teacher continued, "A restless environment creates a restless mind." The man listened carefully, because suddenly his room no longer seemed harmless. The teacher asked, "Do you sleep with noise playing?" The man nodded, usually television, videos, or endless scrolling on his phone. The teacher sighed quietly, then said, "The human mind was not designed for endless stimulation, especially before rest, because when the mind receives constant information, it struggles to become still. And without stillness, true rest becomes difficult." The teacher explained, "Many people today never truly experience silence anymore. From morning until night, notifications, videos, conversations, music, scrolling, stimulation, and eventually the nervous system becomes overwhelmed." But most people mistake stimulation for relaxation. That shocked the man, because every night he used distraction to unwind, yet somehow his mind always felt heavier afterward. The teacher then asked, "Is your room orderly?" The man hesitated, then admitted, "Not really. Clothes piled carelessly, papers everywhere, random objects near the bed." The teacher nodded immediately, because according to ancient wisdom, external disorder slowly creates internal disorder. The man looked around mentally at his room, and suddenly he realized how chaotic it actually felt. The teacher explained, "The mind constantly processes what the eyes see, even unconsciously. So when a person sleeps surrounded by mess, unfinished tasks, visual chaos, the mind never fully relaxes. Instead, it remains subtly alert, and over time, stress increases, focus weakens, clarity disappears." Then the teacher asked another unusual question: "Do you keep reminders of stress near where you sleep?" The man frowned. "What do you mean?" The teacher explained, "Unpaid bills, stressful messages, work documents, unfinished problems, emotionally draining items." The man immediately understood, because beside his bed were constant reminders of pressure. The teacher looked at him carefully, then said, "Rest becomes difficult when stress sleeps beside you." That sentence struck deeply. The teacher explained something ancient families once practiced carefully. The place of rest should not feel like the place of battle. But modern life has mixed everything together. People now work in bed, argue in bed, scroll endlessly in bed, consume stress in bed, and afterward, they wonder why peace disappears. The teacher then pointed toward the man's phone and asked, "What is the last thing you touch every night?" The man answered quietly, "My phone." The teacher nodded slowly, because according to him, that small habit affects millions of minds. The teacher explained, your final moments before sleep shape the condition of your mind. But most people spend those moments consuming negativity, comparing themselves, absorbing stress, overstimulating the brain, and eventually the mind loses peace. The teacher then said something powerful. What enters the mind before sleep often lingers in the spirit afterward. The man became silent because he realized his room had become a place of stimulation, not restoration. That night, the man returned home differently. For the first time, he looked at his room consciously, and suddenly he noticed the noise, the clutter, the tension, the emotional heaviness, things he had ignored for years. So slowly, he began removing them. The television stayed off. The clutter disappeared. The stressful papers moved elsewhere. And for the first time in a long time, the room felt lighter. But the next morning, something strange happened. The man woke up feeling calmer than usual. And what the teacher explained next would completely change the way he viewed sleep, peace, energy, and the hidden effect of everyday objects. Because according to ancient wisdom, some items quietly drain the human mind without people realizing it. The next evening, the man returned to the teacher with curiosity in his eyes, because something unusual had happened the night before. For the first time in months, his mind felt quieter, not perfect, but calmer, and all he had done was remove a few things from around his bed. The teacher listened carefully, then nodded as though he expected it. Because according to ancient wisdom, the environment around a person shapes the condition within them. Most people underestimate this. They believe peace is only internal. But the teacher explained something deeper. The mind constantly absorbs signals from its surroundings, even in silence, even unconsciously. And because of that, some objects slowly create tension, mental noise, emotional heaviness, and restless thinking. The teacher picked up the man's phone from the table, then asked, "Do you know why modern people struggle to become mentally still?" The man shook his head. The teacher answered, "Because their attention never truly rests." That sentence hit deeply. From the moment people wake up, their minds become flooded with information, notifications, comparison, fear, urgency, stimulation, and at night, instead of allowing the mind to slow down, they bring the same chaos into bed beside them. The teacher explained, the final thoughts before sleep are powerful because the brain carries emotional impressions into rest. So when a person spends the last moments before sleep, scrolling endlessly, reading stressful news, comparing their life to others, consuming emotional content, the mind remains active internally, and eventually, true peace becomes difficult. The teacher then said something the man would never forget. A restless night often begins with a restless evening. The teacher then asked, "Do you keep work near where you sleep?" The man nodded immediately. His laptop, documents, business worries, unfinished responsibilities. The teacher sighed quietly, because modern people have destroyed the boundary between work, stress, and rest. According to ancient wisdom, the mind needs separation to recover, but many people now sleep beside pressure itself. And over time, the nervous system never fully relaxes. The teacher explained, when the brain constantly sees reminders of responsibility, it remains subtly alert, even during rest, which is why many people wake up exhausted, even after sleeping for hours, because their body rested, but their mind never truly stopped working. The teacher then revealed something deeper. Not all clutter is physical. Some clutter is emotional. The man looked confused, so the teacher explained, certain objects carry emotional weight because of what they represent. Old arguments, painful memories, unfinished emotional attachments, gifts tied to bitterness, constant reminders of regret. And according to the teacher, keeping such things near the place of rest affects the atmosphere of the mind. The teacher explained, people often carry emotional heaviness into sleep without realizing it. And over time, the mind never feels truly safe. That word stood out to the man. Safe, because suddenly he realized His room did not feel peaceful. It felt mentally crowded. The teacher continued, "Many people are afraid of silence. So every night, they surround themselves with distraction, noise, videos, music, endless stimulation, because silence forces people to confront their thoughts. But according to the teacher, avoiding silence weakens the mind over time." The teacher explained, "Silence allows the mind to settle. Without silence, thoughts remain scattered, emotions remain unresolved, the nervous system stays active, and eventually, inner peace becomes difficult to maintain." The man reflected deeply because he realized something painful. For years, he had used constant stimulation to escape stillness. But escape is not peace. The teacher then revealed an old practice ancient families once followed carefully. Before sleep, lights became softer, noise became quieter, stressful conversations ended, the environment became calm, because wise people understood the condition of the night affects the condition of the next day. That truth struck deeply, because modern people often prepare for sleep in the worst possible way: overstimulated, emotionally overwhelmed, mentally scattered, then wonder why anxiety increases. Over the next several days, the man made more changes. He removed unnecessary clutter, emotional distractions, stressful objects near the bed. He stopped scrolling before sleep, stopped sleeping with noise constantly playing, stopped bringing work into the place of rest. And slowly, something surprising began happening. His thoughts became calmer, his sleep became deeper, and his mornings felt less heavy. But the teacher warned him carefully. Peace is not created only by removing objects. It is also created by protecting what enters the mind daily. Because environments influence thoughts, but thoughts also shape environments. And according to the teacher, many people live surrounded by invisible tension without realizing it. Before leaving, the man asked one final question. "So what should a peaceful room actually feel like?" The teacher smiled softly, then answered, "Like a place where the mind finally stops fighting." And what the man learned next would completely change the atmosphere of his home, the condition of his mind, and the way he lived every single day. Several weeks passed, and the man began noticing something he could not explain. His room had not become luxurious. Nothing expensive had changed. Yet somehow, the atmosphere felt different, lighter, quieter, more peaceful, and strangely, his thoughts were beginning to change too. For the first time in years, his mind no longer felt constantly crowded. So one evening, he returned to the teacher and asked, "Why does changing a room affect the mind so deeply?" The teacher smiled softly, because this was the part most people never understand. The teacher explained, "Human beings absorb environments more than they realize, not only emotionally, but mentally, even physically." The teacher pointed around the room. Every environment teaches the mind something. A chaotic room teaches distraction. A noisy room teaches restlessness. A stressful room teaches tension. But a calm environment teaches stillness. The teacher explained something powerful. Many people believe they are mentally weak, when in reality, they are mentally overwhelmed. That sentence hit the man deeply, because his life had been filled with constant stimulation for years. Noise, pressure, screens, stress, disorder, and eventually, his nervous system adapted to chaos. So when silence appeared, it felt uncomfortable. The teacher continued, "Modern people have become addicted to stimulation. The moment silence appears, they reach for the phone, the television, music, scrolling, distraction, not because they truly need it, but because stillness now feels unfamiliar. And according to the teacher, that is dangerous, because a mind that cannot tolerate silence eventually loses the ability to think clearly." The man asked, "Why does silence matter so much?" The teacher answered slowly, "Because clarity grows in quiet places." That sentence changed something inside the man, because when he reflected honestly, most of his decisions in life had been made hurriedly, emotionally, while distracted, under pressure, very rarely in true stillness. The teacher then pointed toward a pile of books carelessly stacked in the corner. Even small disorder affects the mind subtly. The man looked surprised, because the pile seemed harmless. But the teacher explained, the eyes constantly send signals to the brain. And when the environment feels unfinished, the mind quietly feels unfinished too, which is why clutter often creates mental fatigue, procrastination, emotional heaviness, lack of focus, without people realizing why. The teacher then revealed something ancient families once understood deeply. The home should restore the mind, not exhaust it further. But modern environments often do the opposite. Many homes are filled with noise, tension, distraction, emotional chaos, overstimulation, and over time, people begin carrying that atmosphere internally. As the weeks continued, the man became more intentional about his environment. He no longer treated his room carelessly. Instead, he kept it orderly, reduced unnecessary noise, removed emotional clutter, protected quiet moments before sleep, and gradually, his entire emotional state began changing. He became calmer, more focused, less reactive, more emotionally stable, and surprisingly, other areas of life improved too. The teacher explained, inner peace and external order often strengthen each other, because when the environment supports calmness, the mind becomes clearer, and clearer thinking improves. Decisions, discipline, emotional control, relationships, even financial behavior. That shocked the man, because he never imagined his surroundings affected so much. The teacher continued, people who constantly live in chaos begin reacting automatically, but calm people pause before reacting, and that pause changes everything, because many problems in life are created through impulsive behavior, impulsive words, spending, emotions, decisions, but stillness weakens impulsiveness. One night, the man sat quietly in his room, without distraction, no noise, no scrolling, no chaos, and for the first time, the room felt like a place of restoration instead of escape. That moment affected him deeply, because he realized something painful. For years, he had been overstimulating himself daily, then wondering why peace felt distant. The next morning, the teacher looked at him carefully and said, protecting your environment is also protecting your mind, because eventually, what surrounds a person begins shaping thoughts, emotions, habits, behavior, and behavior quietly shapes destiny over time. The man finally understood. The objects near his bed were never magical, but they influenced his attention, his emotions, his rest, his nervous system, and the condition of his thoughts. And according to the teacher, small daily influences become powerful over years. Before leaving that evening, the man asked one final question. What is the true secret to peace? The teacher looked at him calmly, then answered, remove what constantly disturbs the mind, and peace begins returning naturally. And what the man realized afterward would become the most important lesson of all. The man walked home slowly that evening. The teacher's words echoed in his mind. Remove what constantly disturbs the mind, and peace begins returning naturally. For a long time, he stood quietly at the entrance of his room, looking carefully at a place he had ignored for years. And suddenly, he saw it differently, not just as a room, but as an environment constantly shaping his thoughts. Before meeting the teacher, he believed exhaustion came only from work, only from responsibility, only from life itself. But now, he understood something deeper. Many of the things draining him daily were small influences repeated constantly. Noise, disorder, screens, stress beside the bed, endless stimulation, emotional clutter, things that seemed harmless individually, but powerful when experienced every single day. The teacher once said, many people no longer know how to rest mentally, and now the man finally understood why. Modern life keeps the mind in constant activity. People wake up to noise, work in pressure, eat with distraction, sleep beside stimulation, and eventually, the nervous system forgets how peace feels. The teacher explained something ancient families once understood clearly. The place where you sleep becomes a final atmosphere your mind absorbs every night. That atmosphere matters more than most people realize, because before sleep, the mind becomes highly impressionable. So, whatever surrounds a person during those moments, tension, noise, fear, emotional stimulation, disorder, quietly follows them into rest, and over time, into daily life itself. Weeks later, friends began noticing something different about him. He seemed calmer, more patient, less reactive. Even his face looked less burdened. And strangely, the biggest change did not begin with money, or success, or achievement. It began with peace. The teacher explained, "A peaceful mind makes better decisions, because when the mind becomes calmer, emotions weaken, focus improves, impulsive behavior decreases, clarity returns, and clarity quietly changes every area of life." The man now understood why ancient people protected silence, order, stillness, rest, because those things strengthen the mind. The teacher once warned him, not all damage is loud. Some damage happens quietly over years. A cluttered environment, constant overstimulation, endless noise, emotional heaviness, and eventually, the mind adapts to chaos so deeply that peace starts feeling unfamiliar. That realization disturbed the man deeply, because he remembered how uncomfortable silence once felt to him. Now, silence felt healing. Gradually, the man developed new habits. Before sleep, he reduced noise, avoided emotional stimulation, protected stillness, kept the room orderly, and over time, rest became deeper, his thoughts became clearer, and his mornings no longer felt heavy. But according to the teacher, the greatest transformation was happening invisibly. The teacher explained, external order often helps restore internal order, not perfectly, but powerfully, because when the environment becomes calmer, the nervous system relaxes, and when the nervous system relaxes, the mind becomes less reactive. That affects emotions, relationships, discipline, decisions, even physical energy, which is why wise people throughout history protected their environments carefully. One final evening, the man sat beside the teacher and asked, "What is the greatest mistake people make in modern life?" The teacher answered immediately, "They surround themselves with disturbance, then search desperately for peace." That sentence changed everything, because peace is not created only through desire. It is also protected through discipline, the discipline to remove unnecessary noise, constant distraction, emotional clutter, environments that exhaust the mind. The teacher looked at him carefully and said, "What stays near you daily eventually shapes you, and that includes objects, sounds, habits, conversations, environments, because human beings absorb atmosphere slowly over time." Months later, the man no longer feared being alone with his thoughts. His room became calmer, simpler, quieter, more intentional. And strangely, that external peace slowly created internal peace too. Not instantly, but naturally, because the mind finally had space to breathe. So, tonight, before you sleep, look carefully at what surrounds your bed. Ask yourself, does this environment create peace? Or does it quietly create tension? Does it calm the mind or constantly stimulate it? Because small daily influences become powerful over time, and many people unknowingly destroy their peace every single night through noise, clutter, distraction, emotional overstimulation. The ancient wisdom was never really about superstition. It was about protecting the human mind, because a peaceful environment helps create clearer thinking, better emotional balance, deeper rest, and a calmer life overall. And sometimes, removing a few harmful influences changes more than people expect. Never leave disturbance near the place where your mind is supposed to rest, because peace grows best in environments that allow the mind to finally become still. If this video spoke to you, don't ignore the message. Sometimes peace doesn't disappear all at once. It disappears slowly through the things we allow around us every single day. Subscribe to Ancient Wealth Secrets for more deep lessons on ancient wisdom inner peace, discipline, mindset, and the hidden habits shaping modern life. And before you leave, comment, I choose peace over chaos. Because protecting your mind may be one of the most important decisions you ever make.